All right, thank you, Commissioner Vaughn. We have a motion to approve the minutes from February 11th. All in favor, and we will run around the Brady Bunch board here. Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
Commissioner Horsch,
Yes.
Commissioner Gorblish,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Dana wasn't present.
Thank you. And I will vote as well. Yes. So it looks like we have approval of our minutes from our last meeting. Thank you, everyone. All right. The exciting number 3, bills. John, would you like to fill us in on that?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Bills from last month, we didn't really have too many of them, so very easy.
Are there any questions or comments about any accounts receivables or what we brought in last month? No comments. Do we have a motion? Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Is there a second? Commissioner Horsch. All right. All those in favor of approving the bills, we will run around the board again, starting with Commissioner Vaughn, Commissioner Sinclair, Commissioner Horsch,
Yes.
Commissioner Goblish,
Yes.
and Commissioner Sullivan.
Yes.
I will vote yes as well. Thank you, everyone. We have approval of the bills. We're still in business. That brings us on to item number 4, which is business. Looks like item A, we have a discussion on the Land for a Dollar program, and we have one of our esteemed city staff to lead us through that.
I will kick things off there as we work to make the screen sharing available. To just have a quick presentation for you all to kind of walk you through what staff is proposing for refinements to the Land for a Dollar program. We'll work on them. I'll just roll right into it. It's been included in your packet. Staff is proposing at this time that the Land for a Dollar program be adjusted with respect to the jobs credit. Currently, the program is set up so that the jobs credit is calculated based upon a $13 an hour wage. HEDRA discussed this at your meeting last month, requested that city staff seek some additional data points on that to propose what a potential new hourly wage could be. We reached out to businesses within our industrial park, as well as reached out to Greater MSP to provide data. Based on the data provided and the types of jobs in our industrial park and the kinds of jobs that would be present given the zoning uses allowed within our industrial park, staff landed on a $25 per hour proposal for the basis for calculating jobs credit. So that's kind of one half of the pie here. The other half being with respect to property usage and land sale and what an appropriate amount of building coverage we should expect on a property if we're going to sell that property. Again, the goal of the program is to build tax base, and the best way we can build that tax base is through the construction of the actual buildings themselves, as they have a higher tax capacity. Did a quick analysis of the existing industrial park, looking at building coverage of our existing lots that have been developed, landed on a rough estimate or average of 24% lot coverage across the industrial park for building coverage. So based on that, we rounded up a little bit and are proposing 25%. So both items, we're requesting HEDRA feedback. If you agree with those, we would look to have action to officially amend those portions of it, but certainly looking for discussion and feedback from HEDRA commissioners with staff's proposals. Now, that'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Eric. Does anyone have any question on this or comments?
Question.
Yes.
Just on the $25 an hour, it says there's also a switch to just be newly created full-time jobs. there's a lot of changes going on with full-time jobs now and what's considered full-time equivalency. Some people it's 32 hours a week, some people it's 40 hours a week. In some industries, it's even less than 32 hours a week. Is that in this calculation at all, or how do you calculate that?
So the way that staff calculates that is based on a 2,080 hour year, which is the standard for full-time equivalency. And so that's the basis. And the calculation that goes into the equation really is an increase in overall payroll. So it would be the payroll of newly created jobs, being ones that have been added, or jobs that are new to the city of Hastings. If a business were to move from, say, a Lakeville over to Hastings, it would all be eligible. And so it would be that 2,080 is the hourly rate. In this case, staff's proposing 25. Then we divide that by the total additional payroll that's generated to generate the job equivalence. The job equivalence then is multiplied by currently $5,400 to create a total jobs credit.
Time employees can be added into that total calculation then, is what you're saying.
That is correct because, yeah, it is a payroll equivalency.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Eric and Bruce. Does anyone else have any questions?
A question on the land credit percentage. Eric, when I went through the table, it looked like 34 out of 46 did not meet that 25% that you're shooting for with this amended proposal. So, although 25% may be the average, most businesses by 74% didn't make that initially. Do you think it's realistic that, I understand that, where you're going with this, but do you think that 25% number is realistic?
Commissioner Horsch, I do. I'm certainly open to feedback from HEDRA if you feel that number is too high. Staff did find, looking through old reports, a reference to 20% building coverage. It was from several years ago. John found that in old files, but we do not have anything memorialized within the land credit program itself or within the code that would require that 20%. But we did find a notation for that in an old staff report. Point that, yes, there are a number of properties or businesses that won't hit that threshold. Or from a total land use standard, we do feel that that's it's something that could be achieved. That we do have many properties where we own the adjacent parcels. We can adjust property sizes to try and right size properties in order to fit what a applicant is looking to do, very similar to the one we'll talk about after this in Miller Electric.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, Commissioner Sullivan.
Does this in theory account for like exempt versus non-exempt employees, what that would bring to the table? Because it seems like a big jump in terms of wage differential. And I would just be concerned that anyone who is doing, large industrial work might be precluded, but they'd bring a lot of jobs in. So what accommodates for that? And what is it important?
Yep, great question. So the hourly wage used for the jobs credit calculation isn't a wage that is dictated that these jobs actually pay that amount. It's really just the amount that is used to determine the subsidy that's going to be provided to the business.
Thank you. Mark, do you have a question?
I do, and I don't want to complicate it anymore because I think it's easy to promote a program when it has hard numbers. But I'd ask staff, would it help you if there's a so-called sliding scale where it's from 13 to 25, or going to Commissioner Horsch's question, should it be at 25 to 20% range, and we give staff the the allowance to say, you work it in however you want to work with the potential person that wants to buy a place? Or is it better to say, here it is, our number, and that's what we use as our formula? Can we help you? Does it help you to give you a sliding scale that you can work with?
Commissioner Vaughn, I think it's helpful to have specifics. Specificity is always, I think, a benefit. And at least on the job side of things, again, because it doesn't mandate that these jobs actually pay that amount, having a sliding scale, I think, isn't necessarily a benefit. When I think about the lot coverage, there again, oftentimes the question is, hey, I'd like to do a project. You have some land, which ones are available to me? And currently our response is, well, in theory, all of them for the right project, but we don't really have a good way to say, these ones might make the most sense, or these ones we wouldn't even entertain. A actual policy that says, hey, you need this much building coverage. If somebody came to us and said, I'm going to do a 20,000 square foot building, that would very quickly then make it possible for John and I to say, okay, 25% coverage eliminates, these 4 properties. Look at these 6. These would be good options.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question, Erica. On the scale that you have with percentages, is that from when the project was started, or do you include percentages of businesses that have expanded and put a second building on their property and so forth, or is this based on when they originally purchased the property? The reason I ask is I know I've worked with a couple businesses that have expanded their businesses after a few years, and just want to make sure it's realistic that they can get in there and build and grow with their business as they progress. So.
Yeah, you bet. Good question, Commissioner Goldbush. The analysis that was included in your packet shows the percentages based on how they currently exist today. So it would include any additions that may have been brought onto the property or added on. When thinking about the 25% mark that staff has initially suggested, we do believe that even at 25%, plus knowing that they have to have a parking lot, that there would still be adequate space for a reasonable addition. Again, we're in the business of selling projects for the purposes of economic development and tax base, and less so on the land speculation. And so it's a really careful balancing act between selling enough land to support a project and its long-term viability in the community without selling land that is then speculated and sat on perhaps for longer than it should.
All right, thank you, Eric. Any other comments? Yes, Commissioner Sinclair.
So I am curious, there's a couple examples here that get me thinking about land use as a metric for magnitude of the business. So take 21, which is the auction company that houses lots of RVs and boats and things like that. So their land use is 12%. Or the building use isn't really representative of that, just observationally, I'd say it's not representative of the magnitude of the business. Where people running all over, running boats and trailers and trucks and like that. They need a large footprint in order to run their operation, but it's not necessarily a building footprint. I'm curious. I think we could all rattle off a couple businesses that might be more outdoor based, and the need for land that's not just land sitting there waiting for another building, but it's land needed to run the business. It's just not a building. Can we have some language, at least allow somebody, can we recognize that in some manner to say business needs land outside of a building footprint because of some unique aspect of their business? Number can be looked at on a case-by-case basis. I would just hate for somebody to look at a number, really rule out the possibility based on the fact they go, well, we don't need that big of a building, but we need a lot of land in order to run the business concept that we have in mind. It seems like it might be exclusionary to a certain degree.
Great question. What I would offer is proposing tonight is an adjustment to the land for a dollar credit program. If a business didn't want to pursue that program and the subsidies that come with it, and just wanted to buy the property for market rate, then a 25% building coverage wouldn't come in. But if they want to get a public subsidy, then they would need to hit that threshold.
Great point, Eric. Thanks.
This is a broader question, but when I'm looking at the industrial park and the need to recoup the cost that we had, do we have a history of how have we done? I mean, is there a rating of we've recouped all of it, or we haven't recouped it, or where have we been?
Goldberg, we've begun that conversation really with engineering staff to figure out what a total investment the city has so far into the industrial park area. Because the industrial park along Spiral Boulevard has been developed over several decades at this point, it's been a little difficult pulling out what was done when, what costed what. Just looking at the area most to the east, we do have some preliminary numbers there and came out to roughly 37 cents a square foot that we've got invested into that, not including some of the stormwater and not including some of the improvements in Spiral Boulevard. So we don't have anything definitive yet, but it is a good point to bring up that the goal of this is to recoup those costs and build that tax base, because eventually we will need to look to another area for industrial park, and we'll need to have monies available and show that this worked well, and the city again would invest largely into creating another industrial park, and it all takes capital.
Commissioner Horst, you have a question?
Yes, just again, because I'm somewhat new, what are we looking at for lot availability and how many lots were available initially?
Look at the map here, Commissioner Horsch, with the most recent addition, 10 lots, not including the 50-acre shovel-ready piece that's being held on to for a larger user. He currently owns about 12 lots currently that are available for sale. And we do have a really nice mixture in terms of lot size, everything from an acre to about 3.5 acres before we hit that big 50-acre piece. So we do have a good ability to right size projects as they come in.
Thank you, Eric. Does anyone have any additional questions or comments? All right, thank you, everyone. I understand this was just a discussion tonight. Is that accurate? We're not looking for a motion or a vote on this?
President Piney, if the HEDRA is comfortable with what staff has proposed, it would be appropriate to get some formal direction.
Right. Satellite, does anyone have anything they'd like to add to this, or are we ready for a motion? Right.
I guess I would be more comfortable at $20 as the wage and 20% of the property versus making that large of an adjustment all at once. And then have something in place that we do look at this every 3 years or 2 years or whatever we need to do to adjust it accordingly versus big jump. But that's my thoughts on it.
Anyone on staff have any, do you want to address that at all?
Piney, certainly respect Commissioner Goldberg's thoughts on that. Staff is open to an adjustment if that's where HEDRA would like to go. We simply found some data, provided that to you, provided a recommendation on that, but certainly open to recommendations.
Okay. Commissioner Vaughn.
Here, I guess the question from Commissioner Golish's comment to staff, does that help or hurt you to try to help sell properties out there? I mean, if we lower it, does that make it a better sales pitch that say this is an opportunity? But I want to make sure we're doing the right thing to make sure that when we create jobs, we're going to create good jobs. And that's why thanks for the clarification on the hourly wage, that it's just part of the equation. But I want to do what it takes to move property versus just, I don't want to give it away either. So that's why I'm thinking, I was comfortable with what staff has, but I'm willing to listen to what everybody, maybe Bruce is right. Maybe we start that way and then look at it in 3 years and move it up again if the market says so. I could support that.
President Piney, Commissioner Vaughn, with respect to the $25 an hour versus $20 an hour and how that plays out in the equation, I don't believe it necessarily makes a big difference in terms of the attraction of business and the landing of projects. Once you plug it into the equation, it's a few thousand different either way. So again, we're just trying to calculate for job equivalence, which is then multiplied by $5,400 to get a total jobs credit. And so that $5 an hour either way, when applied to the full payroll, there is a difference. I don't mean to say that there's not, but it's not a shattering difference on the payroll. Again, because we're not mandating that the jobs pay that much for this program. Now, if we got into a business subsidy that was over 150,000 and then state statutes come into play, then we start having a different conversation. But so long as we're just within the city's program, isn't as big of a deal. And that 25 to 20%, that could provide additional flexibility to businesses. But again, it's a balancing act really between right sizing of properties and making sure that we're developing enough for our property to recoup costs and build tax base.
Right, where's everyone feel with us tonight? Are there any comments or questions or additions to this conversation at this point? All right, I will entertain a motion or a way to move forward from tonight.
I would move to move it forward at the $20 per hour with 20% of the property. And I just have a tough time supporting going over 25% when the average of all of them is at 24%. I think it's too big a jump right away. So, so that's my motion is $20 an hour and 20% of the property.
Right, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second that.
Hey, Commissioner Sinclair, thank you. All right, we are ready for a vote then, and we'll go around the board again. And it looks like Commissioner Sinclair, you are first. All right, Commissioner Horsch. Commissioner Goblers.
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn.
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. And we have unanimous decision. Thank you, everyone. All right. Next on our list of business this evening is item B. We are going to consider a preliminary concept plan for Miller Electric. And will be Eric or John heading that up for us tonight?
Yeah, I've got this one as well.
Thank you.
Yes, so again, great activity within an industrial park, another land sale potentially here coming to you. This one would be for a 17,000 square foot building, 3,000 square feet of which would be office space, with the remainder being shop and storage space. This would be for Miller Electrical. This is an existing business in the industrial park looking to purchase another property and develop a building. The current space that they have is rented. There's been a change in ownership within the company, and prior ownership continues to retain ownership of the building and the property, however, not the business itself. And the business now is looking to relocate. When looking at this in terms of analysis standpoint, and they landed on lot 1, which is right at the intersection of Enterprise Avenue and Spiral Boulevard, which is a 2-acre piece of property. And back to our conversation we just ended with, they'd need about 17,500 square feet to hit that 20% threshold for a full 2-acre piece. We could, however, do a lot line adjustment and shrink the property just a bit so that they hit that 20% threshold, since we do own the property immediately to the east. We're showing a future expansion for the property, and it would fit. It is actually very similar to their existing property. It was included in your packet this evening, where this amount of square footage would fit on the existing property. But again, however, because the former owner of the business retains ownership of the building and the property, the now business doesn't have the ability to expand on that property at this time. And so that's why they're looking elsewhere. But we're glad they're still looking in the city of Hastings. They provide an example building. It's something they found online. It's not the specific building that they would design, but they said does reflect the type of materials and the architecture that they would like to achieve with their project. So tonight, we're just looking for HEDRA's response to the project, whether you generally support the proposed site plan and land credit sale. They would be pursuing the land for $1 program, so they would be looking for jobs credit and or the construction credit as part of this project. So that really just looking for any general feedback. If HEDRA is supportive, we would bring forward to your April meeting formal action for purchase.
Thank you, Eric. Does anyone have any comments or questions about this? Yes, Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, this is a well-known company in our area, and their reputation is very good. I'd like to see it continue and expand. I think it's a really great proposal. I really don't see any negatives unless somebody's got some things that I don't foresee yet, but that's just my immediate feedback.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Does anyone else have any comments? I agree with Commissioner Sullivan. I think this seems like a wonderful project. They're a great company, and we're lucky to have them want to stick around. So this seems wonderful. Do we have any other comments or questions tonight on this? Right. So, did we need any action on this tonight, Eric, or are you satisfied here?
No action needed. We'll bring it back to your meeting in April for formal action.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. All right, we will now move on to the next item of business this evening, which is item C, to authorize the Parklet and Sidewalk Cafe Grant Program. And we will be looking for some staff information on that.
President Piney, included in your packet was what staff has outlined for a proposed grant program. And a lot of times it's been previously referred to as a Parklet grant. As staff has evolved this, we think now more so an appropriate name would be Outdoor Dining Grant, given all that would be eligible to apply and be eligible for this funding. This is coming from that $40,000 that was earmarked by HEDRA for the purposes of outdoor dining for the community. We're looking at essentially having categories. The first being parklets with or without a platform. The ones without a platform being that they would be using the street surface for what everything would sit on. We're looking to fund up to $5,000. That'd be a 75% HEDRA contribution, 25% business owner contribution, again, up to a maximum outlay by HEDRA for any individual grant of $5,000. For parklets that utilize a platform, we understand that there's increased costs associated with that. And for that reason, we've proposed that HEDRA would cover the first $1,500 of those that use a platform, a cap of $5,000. And then looking at for sidewalk cafes, and then for private parking lot patios for restaurants that want to pursue that, 50% of costs will be covered by HEDRA, 50% by the applicant, with maximum HEDRA outlay for each individual grant of $1,000. Eligible expenses for this grant would include construction materials, equipment, and furnishings. Ineligible expenses would be labor, design, off-season storage, and any other remaining expense items not listed as eligible. And so for that, we're looking for comments or feedback from HEDRA. If you believe that this program works as outlined or any adjustments you'd like to see. And then staff would like to get formal action approving this so we can get the grant program rolling.
All right, thank you, Eric. All right, does anyone have any questions or comments on this? Yes, Commissioner Vaughn.
Thank you. Eric, do we know, when we take away parking, I'm going to use downtown as an example. Currently, we have a 2-hour parking limit down there. Do we see, and you may not be able to answer this, and either John, do we start to lift that 2-hour parking? Because I think Parklets are kind of saying parking is not as high as priority where it used to be, where they asked for a 2-hour parking limit. Well, now we're taking away parking spots. So can we get rid of the 2-hour parking limit that we have downtown? And my other concern on this is more of a comment is I appreciate you looking to the rest of the community about the next development that we have, and we require parking for a place, but now we're allowing them to take some of the parking up with private parking lot patios. I just don't want us to get caught up with requiring parking, but then you can go use it for a patio type concept. So I just, food for thought for as we get into more developments throughout the community. And then the last part is there a timeline on this? What if we have what if we don't use all the $40,000? Do we just keep it going until somebody uses it up? Or is it kind of a window opportunity for businesses to use? Thanks. So kind of like 3 different things.
Commissioner Vaughn, I can bring the 2-hour parking question forward. You're correct. I'm not sure what the appetite for that would be. Also, I'm not sure, and maybe others in this call do know, but are the city-owned surface lots subject to that 2-hour minimum, or excuse me, maximum?
Yeah, and Eric, I know on the city lots, they are not. Those do not have a 2-hour minimum. On the street parking, predominantly on 2nd Street, the 2-hour limit on there, I wouldn't recommend a change to that. We still want to have the higher turnover on those type of facilities. Recognize that the addition of parklets there is going to take up a portion of that most convenient parking. However, the parking that we have within the downtown, through different studies that we've conducted, it should be adequate, even with the number of parklets. If you took the number of parklets that we had last year, and you take a look at the parking the availability of parking from a day-to-day basis when those were in operation, I wasn't aware of any large issues with that. I think with the improvements that we're asking for this year, in which the owner of the business is going to be more involved in a parklet, we're not going to see as many of them because there's going to be, a more cost and a larger commitment.
Thank you, John.
And then Commissioner Vaughn, to your last question there regarding timing. We saw this as a one-time grant opportunity, given where the funding is coming from. And with, in my mind, I had a June 30th deadline. And again, on a first come, first served basis, with the thought being that, again, this is meant to assist with COVID restrictions. And hopefully by mid-June, we're in a place that's a lot better. But also anybody that was looking to do outdoor dining will have or should have made arrangements well before the end of June for their outdoor dining opportunities. So I don't see it precluding anybody from being able to do it. But it is also far enough out that if somebody needs to make a little money first as spring kind of gets rolling, they've got the ability to do so.
Thank you, Eric. Commissioner Sullivan, did you have a question?
It was answered by the last comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or questions or suggestions on this topic? All right, seeing none, how would we like to proceed at this point? Eric, do you feel like you have enough information for a vote, or is there anything that we need to bring this into the next meeting for?
President Piney, I think I've got what we need. I'm not hearing any proposed revisions to what staff has presented. If there's any proposed revisions to what staff has presented, I'd like to hear that. But otherwise, my understanding is that we're good as presented.
All right, at this point, I guess we will entertain a motion if there are no other questions or comments.
I'll make a first motion.
Commissioner Sullivan, do we have a second? Horsch, thank you. All right, everyone, we will begin the voting process. And it looks like Commissioner Goblish, you have moved into box number 1.
Say yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Vaughn.
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan,
Yes.
Commissioner Horsch,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
and I will vote yes as well. Thank you, everyone. All right, moving on to the next item on our business list this evening is item D, and we will be appointing the new HEDRA attorney, Corinne Land. John or Eric, do you have any statement or information you'd like to provide us with?
President Piney, as the request points out, we lost our longtime attorney, Dan Flegel, who is no longer representing the city. He also represented HEDRA on matters as well. We went through a search, interviewed a couple of different firms for the city attorney position. Appointment on February 16th of Corey Land to serve as city attorney. With HEDRA being a separate organization, we were asking for a similar appointment as the HEDRA attorney. Now, as HEDRA attorney, we have 2 attorneys. We have our primary attorney, which would be Corey. We also have a secondary attorney as well, Andrea McDowell-Peeler, who helps on some specialized issues. That would not change. Corey comes to us with a large amount of experience, serving over 20 years in municipal law, serving also as the city attorney for Stillwater and West St. Paul and Cottage Grove, as well as Hastings right now. So comes forward with some good experience, comes from a law firm in which there is a lot of other attorneys that are specializing in municipal law. And so we ask for that appointment tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Does anyone have any comments on this matter? Commissioner Horsch.
In my former life as the civil division head in Dakota County, I can tell you that I worked both with Corey on issues and I was on the opposite side of the table with Corey, and I have the greatest respect for her. She's a well-known expert in this law, and she's served around the state, and I would wholly endorse her.
Thank you, Commissioner Horsch. That's a great endorsement. Does anyone else have any comments? It seemed to me that there are so many congruencies with representing both the city and HEDRA that this just makes a great deal of sense. All right, I guess we'll be looking for a motion at this point.
I'll move appointment of Corinne Land as the HEDRA attorney.
Thank you, Commissioner Horsch. Do we have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We will begin our voting process with Commissioner Goblish.
Yes.
Commissioner Horsch.
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn.
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair.
Yes.
I will vote yes as well. And we now have a new attorney. Thank you, everyone. All right, we are on to item 5 this evening. We have reports and information. And item A is the Luke Seward apartment project. And we'll be looking for an update from Eric or John.
Piney, I'll kick things off. Mailing of your packets, staff did receive an updated construction estimate from Seaver Construction on behalf of Mr. Luke Seward. Did show an increase in estimated project costs. So we've inputted that into our sources and uses and continue to utilize that information as it comes in. Since Friday, staff has continued to work with Mr. Seward on trying to find a navigable way forward to see this project to fruition. We continue to do that. I'm trying to get creative as best we can while still keeping really to this process intact. We're hopeful that come April, we'll have something before HEDRA that would be formal action to see this project forward. It's the update I've got for this evening. We're not looking for any formal HEDRA action. John, is there anything you would like to add?
I just want to add, want to thank Eric for the work that he's been doing on this project. As you know, getting housing in the downtown area is certainly a priority for all of us involved here. We remain hopeful on this project that this is something that can come to fruition. We're still, frankly, kind of stuck on the issue of the land price for the property. We're trying to find ways to move beyond that. That would be something that would need to be resolved. We repeated back with the applicant, Mr. Seward, at the discussion we had at HEDRA last month, at which we had a couple of options before the board. One to sell the land for $1, pursuant to some other some other requirements that for public subsidy, and then ultimately the decision that was made, which was to have further information submitted by Mr. Seward to justify the subsidy. So we're still looking for that information from Mr. Seward to move forward on this.
Thank you, John and Eric. Does anyone on the commission have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Sinclair.
John, Eric, my question is, when we talk about a subsidy, my understanding is that we've established that there's a subsidy if he's offering less than what the city has determined to be the value of the land. City's determination of value of the land, I understand, to be based more on assessed value than what my experience is that you determine value based on appraisal. Reasonable to assume that assessed value is a known amount. I mean, people don't buy and sell property based on assessed value, not in the world that I know. So assuming that we need value, or could we does HEDRA, I think, curious if HEDRA believes that appraised value is a better determination of value, therefore a better benchmark for the determination of subsidy. Best value question, and if so, if the answer is yes, then how do we move towards getting a commercial appraisal of that land so that we can use that as the baseline and benchmark for the subsidy?
John or Eric, would you like to address that? Do you have any comments to that issue?
President Piney, I'll hold until unless there's any other HEDRA members that want to speak to that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Are there any other questions here tonight, everyone? Commissioner Goblish.
That was a good question about the value of it. And, you know, you're looking at a lot that is $70,000 or $60,000 that we've assessed it at. But then you also have a property right next door that had a larger value to it because it has a home on it. But to do what we need looking to do, you actually have to demolish that building and bring that value down to where the value of the other one is. So even the fact that it's a parking lot makes it more difficult for him to look at building on that property. So he's going to have to take that parking lot out too. So I think there is, you know, when you combine the two, you're looking at appraised value. When you look at the combined of the two of them, it's going to be significantly higher based on what he's planning on doing. As is now, you can't make anything out of it unless you combine those two lots. So I think there is justification for a subsidy based on the fact that you're not going to be able to do anything other than what we have now as an older house and a parking lot with that lot.
Bruce, we don't have to take into consideration the value of his lot. That sunk cost, he owns that property, he owns that lot as is. I'm more curious about an appraisal of his own lot as a benchmark for determination of value, because I'm just curious. My assumption is that the appraised value would actually be less than assessed value, because I don't think assessed value has really been looked at being a non-tax-paying entity. They don't look at them. They don't update them unless there's a compelling reason to do it. Understanding of how assessor offices work on non-tax-paying entities. They just go, they just blow past them because there's no compelling reason to review them. So that's where I'm, in my mind, I'm making the assumption that are actually assuming that assessed value will be less too. That is in fact true, then we're basically trying to determine a subsidy that may or may not even exist. If we agreed that we're going to determine price based on appraised value, not assessed value.
Mr. Sinclair, I can respond to that a little bit, and then possibly Eric can come in as well. I would agree in general that the assessed value of the property is going to likely be lower than what the appraised value is in the parking lot. That being said, the $10,000, $20,000, whatever that figure might be, based upon a potential subsidy that we're going to be granting on the property. Ultimately, Mr. Seward is seeking to acquire that property for $1. The project cost that he has shown is in the neighborhood of about a $5.5 million building. And so if he could provide us the justification on that to say, hey, this gap is present, and that difference when you're looking at that figure between $60,000 value on the lot, $30,000 value of the lot isn't really all that much. It's just a matter of coming forward for that information. I mean, we could go forward and have an appraisal done on the property. We'd be out of pocket that cost, which is what it is, but the developer's ultimately looking at it to sell it for $1. So we'd be out even more money than that. So it seems to me that just providing the information to justify that subsidy, then we would be past this point. And Eric, I'm not sure if you have any more to add to that.
I'll add one item to that is the concept of having an appraisal has been brought up between staff and Mr. Seward. What was proposed essentially was that he was seeking for staff and possibly even HEDRA to agree in advance of a appraisal being done that whatever the appraisal came back at, that we agree to. Response to that was we would not nickel and dime an appraisal, but would want to reserve the ability to review it to make sure that it comes back and is reasonable. So it doesn't come back and say $500 or something. And so that's kind of where the appraisal conversation is at currently. We could still continue to have that with Mr. Seward and pursue an appraisal. I do agree. We've got the county assessed value to go off of, and the assessed value and what things end up getting paid for are two very different things. But to John's point, the likelihood that we sell this for $1 is high. And so if we sink money into an appraisal ourselves, that is just additional sunk costs for HEDRA.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. I saw that you've been trying to get in here.
Could we potentially contract for a short-term loan during the building process? So if it doesn't come to fruition, all amounts are paid back or they forfeit the property or whatever the case may be, so that you can't really lose the property altogether. So a sale doesn't take place until components of the agreement are met, so to speak. Is there a way to do that so that it's kind of a no-lose situation?
Sullivan, the purchase and development agreement would be structured such that there'd be conditions that would need to be met or performance standards, approval, building permit, things like that, before the city or before HEDRA would actually turn over the title to the property itself. And so that's already kind of our standard practice, is my understanding. And really they're looking to secure the lot for $1, and that's what staff has proposed is $1. And then if the financing comes back than anticipated, there'd be a clawback to the purchase agreement that would then see the city recoup those costs if the financing is able to carry the full potentially appraised value of the property.
All right, thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Right, I'd like to thank John and Eric. I know that you both put in a great deal of time on this, and thank you to everyone on HEDRA for your thoughts and comments. This is a pretty big project potentially. I'm happy to hear that it will be on the agenda next month. I really looking forward to getting us through this. I think that this is a really important project for HEDRA and for the community as a whole. So thank you everyone for your input and your thoughts, and keep looking forward, and that's how we'll progress. All right. Now on to item B, commercial vacancy.
President Piney, a brief update on the commercial vacancy information within your packet. A couple of vacancies have opened up. One downtown with Planet Beach. So we've had a few people that we've directed that way already. So hopefully that'll be short term. We've had real good luck within our downtown area of having spaces that are open being leased up very, very quickly. Also have a purchase within the industrial park of an existing building at 671 East 31st Street. That has been purchased, a wholesale food business that will be occupying that space, and that is under development at the moment. When we look at the development update section here, we're seeing a tremendous amount of construction activity and in potential construction activity coming forward. A number of things bullet pointed within your packet here on projects moving forward. A lot of residential development that is looking to break ground here this spring, which is great. That has been recognized by a couple of media outlets, by Finance and Commerce Magazine and the Star Tribune. So these projects will be going in the ground this spring. This is about another 300 units in senior housing and single family housing throughout the city. On top of that, the conversations that we're having with potential developers on more development beyond this is more than it's been in a long time. So the people that are kicking the tires, looking at other people that have invested in the city and looking at this as more potential investment for new construction of housing is there. So I think this is a trend that's going to be continued. Frankly, it's something that's been a bit overdue with our lagging behind some of our neighboring cities in development on the residential side the last few years. It looks like we're starting to make up for it, which is great.
Thank you, John.
I think that's all we had formally tonight.
That's all I'm seeing on my list here this evening. Unless anyone has anything else, Commissioner Vaughn?
John, on the Confluence project, I think the assessments came out recently. When will we find out what the debt that we'll have to do this year will be?
Yeah, I will have that for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right, it looks like we have covered everything that's on our list tonight. Unless anyone has any other comments or items they'd like to bring up for discussion, we can entertain a motion.
Adjourn.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan, and we will go around the screen again. Commissioner Goblersch,
Yes.
Commissioner Horsch,
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan,
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair.
Yes.
And if you're all leaving, I will vote yes as well. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
See you.